Hey, look at this from last night from Anita Anand, Canada's foreign minister. It's a tweet, and that's about all it's worth. She says, Canada is horrified by the attacks in Fasher and condemns the reported mass killing of over 2,000 civilians. We urge all parties to uphold international law, protect civilians, and allow the unimpeded passage of humanitarian aid immediately. Canada will continue to support the people of Sudan, as we have since the conflict began, including through the $64 million in humanitarian assistance, $24.8 million in peace and stabilization assistance, and $14.5 million in development assistance that we announced earlier this year. So it was such a bad massacre. Seriously, satellite photos could see where the earth was stained red from the blood. When you murder 2,000 people in a bloody way, it's visible from space. Here's a report from the prestigious Telegraph of London. Scroll down and you can see where the earth is literally red with blood. I'll read a bit from the story, since Anita Anand, for some reason, won't even say who did it. Isn't that curious? She says there's a mass killing. 2 sentences later, she mentions the country, Sudan, but not who did it. And then she really wants to say what she really wants to say, which is how much money Canadian taxpayers are sending to Sudan. And let's be charitable and believe that maybe 10% of the money actually gets to the people who need it, as opposed to being hoovered up by corrupt politicians and warlords and put in some Swiss bank account or crypto. Yeah, it's weird that Anita Anand won't even say the name of the murderers. I guess if she can't accuse Israel of something, it's really not that important to her, is it? I mean, the real point is to tell Sudanese Canadians that she's sending a lot of money, I think. Visible from space, I'll read now. Visible from space, Sudan's bloodied sands expose a massacre of thousands. Satellite pictures taken after the fall of Fasher show evidence of mass killings. Let me read a little bit from the story. The hot sand around the Sudanese city of Fasher is stained red with the blood of more than 2,000 massacred civilians. The pools of blood are so thick, the piles of bodies so clear, that the ethnic purge allegedly committed by Sudanese paramilitary rebels is visible from space. Militia groups defending the city, alongside the army, alleged the Rapid Support Forces, RSF, that's the name of the terrorist group, quote, committed heinous crimes against innocent civilians, and said most of the dead were women, children, and the elderly, unquote. So they're not even pretending that it's not ethnic cleansing, ethnic murder. Sudan's 2.5-year-long civil war has rekindled ethnic bloodshed in the region, with RSF fighters accused of massacring black African groups to take their land. The RSF is largely drawn from Arab militias and formed from the notorious Janjaweed, responsible for genocide and mass atrocity in Darfur 20 years ago. The RSF capture of other enclaves, including El Geneina in 2023, led to ethnic massacre of thousands of people. There are some absolutely horrible images online. I wish I didn't see them. One of them involved young children being hanged. It's so gross, and they're not hiding it. And why would they need to hide it? People like Anita Anand will hide it for them. I'm not going to show those pictures. It's really, really weird that she just says, literally, her only call to action is, and I quote, we urge all parties to uphold international law. They're terrorists. What are you talking about? Protect civilians. Protect them. They're killing. That's like saying we urge the murderer to protect the murder victim. There's a murderer. And to allow the unimpeded passage of humanitarian aid immediately. Protect civilians, eh? They're positively massacring them on purpose. Uphold international law. That's all we've got as a country. That's all Anita Anand has got. That's your big ask. Hey guys, can you just tone it down, or else? There actually is no or else, is there? 2,000 women and children killed in one day on purpose. That was the collateral death toll of civilians in maybe an entire month of the Israel-Gaza war. And in that case, it was inadvertent in that Hamas was hiding under schools and hospitals as a deliberate strategy. This in Sudan is a purposeful massacre to ethnically cleanse Sudan. But the killers are Arab and Muslim, and Sudan is 97% Muslim. And Anita Anand's comments about Israel were only ever about domestic politics and best not to criticize any Arabs or Muslims. Black lives don't matter if they're being killed by Arabs in Sudan. Hey guys, if you're massacring 2,000 women and children, be sure to follow international law, okay? But why no sanctions or trade embargoes against Sudan like Canada has started to do against Israel? Why not calls to arrest these Sudanese generals like the Liberals have said publicly about Benjamin Netanyahu? Just in the last few weeks, Mark Carney has confirmed he would arrest Benjamin Netanyahu, the democratically elected Prime Minister of Israel, if he set foot in Canada. Why not for these Sudanese murderers? Why no endless press releases, speeches, UN votes, summits? Why not marches in the streets? Why no op-eds? The death toll is much bigger, by the way, 150,000 just in the last year or two, and much more going back a generation. Why are there no Sudanese flags on the streets? Why no pro-Sudanese graffiti? Why no encampments at universities? There's a commentator in Israel that I've started to follow. He's so sharp, and his name, it's hard to pronounce. It's Haviv Rettig Gur. That's his name. I think he's a very clear thinker, and he wrote a long tweet yesterday about Zoran Mamdani. That's the Muslim socialist who's about to win the New York City mayor's election. And Gur talked about the unique nature of anti-Semitism. Why it's different? And, you know, I just read it, and I've known about anti-Semitism for a long time, but this was so clear. Will you permit me to read about 2 minutes worth of quotes from him? Please permit me, because it really opened my eyes. He was talking about Zoran Mamdani, but I think it applies to Sudan and the Janjaweed militia and everything that I just talked about. So let me quote him. He says, "I honestly and authentically think that the global campaign to dissect everything Israeli, to label and libel it, every term of art for evil that academia has ever produced is leveled at Israel, while all the world's crimes and criminals are ignored. Marches in Western capitals totally unprecedented in the history of Western protest, and which won't return for any other future war unless Israel is involved. What if I honestly believe it's a global outburst of anti-Semitism and not, given its extreme selectivity, a genuine concern for the victims of war? Anti-Semitism isn't hatred of Jews." This was new to me. I think he's right here. He said, "It isn't mere stereotypes or prejudices. It's a much more interesting and powerful and destructive idea. It is the casting of Jews as the obstacle to redemption and utopia. In Islamic dogma, even in the mainstream, Jews are said to have lied about their revelation, and so are the great liars of history, as demonstrated by their refusal to accept Islam during Muhammad's time and ever since. To Hamas and Muslim Brotherhood ideologues, Israel's Jewishness, making its survival a challenge to Islam's rightful redemptionist expansion, is the reason it must be eradicated. It's not about Palestinian rights or ending military rule in the West Bank." I think that's right. Even in my debates a few weeks ago with some online right-wing activists who were taking potshots at Jews, they're so viscerally irritated by the Jews about everything. They had truly internalized the Jews as their cosmic enemy, their universal enemy, their nemesis, and nothing in their lives would ever be right. Nothing in America would ever be right. Nothing in politics would ever be right until the Jews were gone. And then everything in their lives would be perfect. I really started to see that in some. Let me back to Gur. Let me just read one more passage. He says, "And in progressive discourse today," he was talking about Zoran Mamdani, "the world's only Jewish state, and no other state, even if it is far larger, more powerful, or commits vastly greater mistakes and crimes, is once again coded as the distillation of all evils, as standing in the way of the progressive utopia. All the world's problems, every evil in the progressive or academic imagination, imperialism, colonialism, settler colonialism, apartheid, genocide, ecocide, and a dozen other sides are encapsulated and distilled in Israel. No one rages or marches this way about Russia or China or the endless massacres and genocides of the Arab world. No one pins every evil ever conceived on any other people." I think that's a good point. I mean, there's a lot of anti-black racism in the world, but I've never heard people say the blacks are undoing, and if it weren't for black people, my life would like it's not that universal scapegoat, the universal explanation. And let me play you the clip that Gore was referring to. It was Mamdani a couple of years ago saying, all our problems with the NYPD are because every year a few cops go and train in Israel, just like they train in Jordan, train in Qatar. I mean, the New York Police Department trains with a lot of police forces around the world. Look at this clip from Zoran Mamdani basically saying everything wrong with the massive New York Police Department is because a few police cross-train with Israel. Take a look at this clip.
The importance for me of international solidarity is that it takes me out of the American political landscape and reminds me just how tame some of the things are that I'm actually calling for. True. And it reminds me of the necessity of grounding ourselves in the struggles as opposed to the fights around the struggles. For anyone to care about these issues, we have to make them hyperlocal. We have to make clear that when the boot of the NYPD is on your neck, it's been laced by the IDF. We're in a country where those connections abound, especially in New York City. You have so many opportunities to make clear the ways in which that struggle over there is tied to capital's interest over here.
Yeah, he's basically saying the Jews are behind every misfortune. And I raise all that because Anita Anand does not care about the 2,000 civilian victims in Sudan. She doesn't care. She couldn't even be bothered to name who killed them. Isn't that weird? She didn't even bother for a couple sentences to say where this happened. She couldn't be bothered to propose a solution other than bragging about how much money she's throwing at corrupt African warlords. She doesn't care. You think she cares? She doesn't care about the million Muslims in concentration camps in China. It's not about caring. She doesn't care about any of it. She only cared about Israel and what she could blame on Israel. And she still cares about Israel because whether she just goes along with this for anti-Semitic votes or whether she's internalized the anti-Semitism herself, the only thing that makes her actually mad is the Jews. I'm sorry, but it's true. It's very true on the left, and it's true more and more on the bizarre online right. And I include people I once looked up to in that, like Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens, who have become positively obsessed. They cannot go a day without talking about Israel or the Jews. They've lost their bearings. It's hard to take as a Jew, but I think I would say this even if I weren't a Jew. There's people out there with a kind of cult, a kind of mind virus, a kind of drug, and it's not good.